Hey everyone, this is Ryan Baxter from IBM. I'm a developer advocate for codename BlueMix, and I'm back again with another video. And today I'd like to talk about DevOps in BlueMix. So I'm here in the catalog on BlueMix, on BlueMix.net, and if you scroll down, you may have noticed this service called JazzHub DevOps. So JazzHub DevOps actually doesn't provide much in the way of integration with your application like many of the other services do in the catalog, but instead it provides tools for you as a developer to use to build and deploy your applications to BlueMix. So JazzHub is actually a separate offering from IBM, from IBM's Rational team, and it offers a great set of capabilities for developers building large applications. It includes source control management, project management, and now the ability to build and deploy the application that you're building right to BlueMix in the cloud as well. One of the other cool things that JazzHub offers is the ability to edit your code right online in a web IDE based on Orion, which is in a project that's coming out of the Eclipse Foundation. So if you click on the service and then go to view the full documentation, you'll see a little bit about how to use JazzHub and BlueMix. So the first thing you need to do is register at JazzHub. So you can head on over to JazzHub. I've already registered and have an account here, so I'm just going to go and sign in. And let me sign in with my IBM ID. Okay, so once you've logged in, you'll be brought to this My Stuff page, which has all of your projects that you're involved with on JazzHub. I'm going to create a new project just to show you how this works. So let's create a new project here. And I'm just going to call this project Chatter, which we'll see why in a second. And I'm going to select this for the source control. You can either select Jazz, SCM, Git, or you can import a project from GitHub. I'm going to use just plain Git here on JazzHub. And I'll make the project private for now. And I do want to add the ability to deploy to BlueMix, so I'm going to click that as well. And I'm going to click Create. And in a moment, we'll have a new project created and ready to go on JazzHub. So you can see it basically gives me a very basic project with just a license and README file in it. This is very similar to GitHub, where it gives me a URL that I can then go and clone this project and then put my code in here. So let's do that. Let's copy this URL here, and I'm going to open up my terminal window, and let's clone the project. So we're going to do git clone and the URL. Okay, so now our project is cloned, and we can see into Chatter, and we see that we should have a license and README file there from the project on GitHub. Good. So I already have the code for this application built out already, so no point in doing that. I'm just going to copy some code into this folder, and then we're going to push it back to JazzHub. So I'm going to go to my Finder here, and here's the code for the project. It's a basic Node application, and what this application basically does, what Chatter actually does, is it's kind of like an IRC type of application or a chat type of application where you can go enter a username and then just start chatting with people. It's built in Node and uses Redis as a way of pub sub between the various different instances of the application that are running, but not particularly important for this demo. So I got my code now in my Git repository on my local machine. So if I do git status, we can see which files have been modified, which files have not been added yet. I want to add everything, so I'm going to do git add this current directory. And now if I do git status, we'll see that we've now have a bunch of changes that need to be committed. So we will do git commit, and we'll give it the message of initial commit. Okay, and then we just need to push all these changes up to the remote repository. So now we're going to say git push origin master. And this is your basic Git workflow. There's nothing special about doing this, just because it's on JazzHub. So now we've pushed everything up to our master branch on JazzHub. So now if we refresh this page, we should see all of the files from that directory here in JazzHub. So there they all are. Now the one thing I want to point out in order to make the deployment to BlueMix from JazzHub work properly is you need to have a manifest .yml file. If you're not familiar with manifest files yet, they're a very cool feature of Cloud Foundry and the Cloud Foundry command line. Typically, when you push an application from the Cloud Foundry command line tool, you'll do cf push the application name. Maybe you need to specify a build path, the memory, the number of instances you want, and then you also need to go and do cf bind service to bind service. So the command to push the application can be very verbose. So instead of having to specify that long command every time you want to push an application, you can create what's called a manifest file and specify everything that you would put on the push command in this file. So instead of having to have a verbose cf push command, you can just do cf push, and the cf push command will look for this manifest file and use the properties from within the manifest file to push your application. Now, since we're in JazzHub and we're not executing a cf push and you can't specify commands here, the manifest file is critical to have in your project, at the root of your project. When JazzHub goes to deploy the project to BlueMix, it looks for this file and uses this file as the properties to push your application with. So I want to enable what's called auto deployment for my JazzHub project, and auto deployment will basically auto deploy the application to BlueMix every time someone commits a change back to the project in JazzHub. So this really sets up a good continuous integration, continuous delivery model where I immediately make some changes and I push them to the cloud, and I can go and see those changes immediately in the cloud, live and ready to go. So it's a very fast-paced development for what we're used to today, where you may have very long development cycles before anything gets live. With the cloud, it's very fast-paced, so you push your changes into source control, and immediately they're built and put out and tested and built and put out onto the cloud live for everyone to use. So I'm going to enable the auto deployment. I'm just going to turn this on. And it's going to immediately start to do its first deployment, since I haven't done one yet. One thing to note here is you can go and configure the deployment that's happening or how it deploys. So you can choose an organization or a space. You can choose to use a manifest file, or you can choose to use a specific name or link to an existing application that you may already have in BlueMix. I'm just going to use the manifest file for now. And I actually expect this deployment to fail because we haven't yet created one of the services, the Redis service that the application needs to use yet. So you can see, yeah, service instance Redis chatter cannot be found in target space. So let's go ahead and create that so it can be used. So we're just going to do cf login and specify the BlueMix API endpoint. And I'm going to enter my username and password. Okay, and now I just need to do a normal cf create service. So let's just look first so I can get this right. So we'll do cf marketplace and it'll display all the service. Here right at the bottom is the Redis service. This is the name of the service. This is the plan I need to specify. So we're going to do cf create service. Redis is the name of the service we want to create. Plan is 100, and the name I want to give this service is Redis Chatter. And the Redis Chatter name that I gave the service is very important, because if we go back to the manifest file, we'll see that it's looking for a service named Redis-Chatter. So we wanted to name our service to be have the same name. So it's when it goes and pushes the application and binds to the service, that it's binding to the service with the right name. Okay, so let's go back to our auto deployment. I'm gonna turn this off and then turn it on again so it does the push. So now we're going to do this push, and I expect this push to succeed properly. Okay, so the push succeeded. And now if I go back to BlueMix here and go to my dashboard, we'll see we have the Blue Chatter, or the Chatter application, is now deployed here. And I can click the URL and we see it's live. So let's just make sure it works. To do this, we just need another browser window. And let's open the browser window up. Same application up here. And let's just shrink this so make things easier. Okay, so I'll log in here as Ryan. And I'll log in here as John. And you can see as people chat here, they show up in the different browser windows. Okay, so our application looks like it's working properly. So now let's test out this auto deploy stuff. Let's make a change to the application and see how JazzHub will automatically deploy the app. So let's go to Sublime and we'll open the application code here. So it is in my temp directory here. Okay, now let's just make a quick change to the HTML file here. So we want to change this text to be to say type something below. Okay, so we'll change that, and here we'll do a git status, and we can see we have some modifications that we need to commit. So we'll do git add everything, and then git commit, and we'll give it a message of updated HTML. Not very meaningful. And then we'll do git push origin master to get it back up into JazzHub. Okay, everything's pushed back to JazzHub. So now if we look back on JazzHub in the auto deployment here and refresh, we should see we have an auto deployment pending because we made a change. So I made a small change. I want to test it out on JazzHub, and now it's going to do the push to BlueMix to make the change I just made live. Okay, so we can see that the push succeeded with the specific commit. And now if I refresh our Blue Chatter application and click go, we can see here's the change I just made. Type something below. Okay, so say I ended up not wanting to make that change, right? And I want to revert what I just did, but I don't want. I'm at a computer where I haven't, I don't have Git installed and I don't have a text editor, and I can't easily make a change. So I can easily make the change to my code in JazzHub, because as I mentioned, there's an editor here in JazzHub that lets me make changes online. So if I go back to my overview and click edit code here, it will bring me to a web-based IDE where I can make and commit changes to. So let's go back to my public folder here and in my index.html. Let's remove the code, the HTML that I added here, because I don't really like that anymore. And I'm just going to go and save that. And now if I go over here, I can check the git status just like I was doing from the command line before, and I can stage the change to the index.html, and I can see what changes were actually made here. Let me just expand this here. So I can see what changes I've actually made, which is exactly what I want. I want to remove the thing I just did. So let's stage it. And now let's commit it. And we can say reverted HTML change. And we'll submit that. And then just like we were doing in the command line, we need to push it. So let's push. And okay, so now we've pushed our changes. And if we go back to the project and again look at our auto deployment, we see we have another deployment running for the changes that we just made. Okay, so our deployment finished. So let's go back to the Blue Chatter application and we will enter a username again, and we can see that the changes are no longer there. Everything seems to be working. Let's just test it out one final time. And we'll refresh here. And let's just type something. There we go. So everything's working. Cool. So the one last thing I just want to show is you don't actually have to use the auto deploy feature to deploy your project every time. You can choose to selectively deploy your project. So again, I'm just going to jump back into the edit code here. And there's this deploy button up at the top here. So if you at any time, say you didn't have auto deploy enabled, at any time you want to deploy the code that you currently have, or maybe you want to deploy code that has changes in it that you haven't committed back to the repository, you can click this deploy button here and it will do the same thing that the auto deploy is doing every time you commit the change. So you can deploy right from BlueMix into right from JazzHub into BlueMix without having to do enable auto deploy as well. So that's it, and that's essentially the integration for BlueMix and JazzHub. And feel free to leave comments or ask questions. You can find me online at Ryan J. Baxter on Twitter, or you can find my blog at ryanjbaxter.com. Thanks again for listening. See you soon.